Hey, what's up guys? Will here for GSM Arena. One of the biggest flagships of the year is here, the Huawei Mate 30 Pro. But the feeling is kind of bittersweet. If Google services aren't available on this phone, what sort of package are we looking at, and is it still worth getting? Let's find out in our full review. The Huawei Mate 30 Pro is made of glass, like many other phones these days. Its look is pretty unmistakable though, with its unique tall wraparound screen and round camera setup. We've seen our share of curved displays, but this is the most extreme one yet. With this waterfall design, it extends almost around the entire edge of the phone. There's just a sliver of shiny aluminum supporting it at the bottom. This means there are basically no visible side bezels, although it brings into question how sturdy this build really is. If you happen to bump the edge of the phone, that's glass you'll be hitting. Gorilla Glass, but still. Another issue this brings up is where to fit the hardware buttons. Huawei solved the problem by getting rid of the volume buttons entirely. To adjust the sound level, you'll have to double tap on the screen. There is still a power key though. The third concern is with accidental hand activations, which you'd think would happen more often, but actually I didn't have too much of a problem with them. Our Mate 30 Pro is in space silver, and the gradient finish goes from blue to purple. It all looks quite mirror-like. Surrounding the camera setup is a round accent, sort of like a shiny donut. And since the setup is in the center, the phone is balanced, and you can use it on a desk without wobbling. Another nice aspect of the build is that you won't have to worry about water getting in, thanks to the phone's IP68 rated water and dust resistance. Let's take a closer look at what Huawei calls its Horizon display. It's a 6.5-inch curved OLED with a tall aspect ratio and a 1080+ resolution. Up at the top, there is a notch cut out for the selfie cam. It's too bad that Huawei couldn't have made the top and bottom as bezel-less as the sides. The notch won't get in the way of content, but YouTube doesn't work well, so we ended up with black bars here. The screen itself looks great though. There's nice contrast and deep blacks. Sharpness is good too. Colors look nice. They're not the most accurate, but you can tweak them as you like in settings. Oh, and there's support for HDR content too. Maximum brightness is around 460 nits with the slider. Pretty high, but not the brightest we've seen among flagships these days. You should have no problems in the sun though. With auto mode on, these situations will bring out as much as 680 nits. There is an always-on display that you can enable to show you the time and any notifications that may come up. I really like the convenience of this sort of feature, and wish it was on even more devices. Just like the P30 Pro, the Mate 30 Pro uses the display as an earpiece. It vibrates to conduct the sound, and delivers great clarity in your calls, and sound leakage isn't an issue. Under the display is an optical fingerprint scanner for you to wake up and unlock the phone with. It's super fast and accurate, one of the best I've tried this year. You can also use Face Unlock. It's quite fast too, and actually pretty secure thanks to 3D mapping from the TOF camera. Unlike many premium phones these days, the Mate 30 Pro doesn't have a stereo speaker setup. There's just the one loudspeaker at the bottom. However, it does do a great job. We measured excellent loudness, and the lows, mids, and highs are all well done. Just as before, you can't plug in normal headphones without an adapter, as there's no 3.5mm jack. You do get USB-C earbuds in the box though. You get 128 or 256 gigs of storage on the Mate 30 Pro, which should last you a while. And if you need more, it is expandable. Sadly, you'll need to use one of Huawei's proprietary nano memory cards to do it. At least you get an IR blaster, which you don't find so often these days. With it, you can use the phone to control certain appliances around the house. Now, let's get into the biggest controversy with this phone, the software. As you may have heard, the USA's beef with Huawei means that American companies like Google can't work with them. That means new Huawei devices like this one don't have support for Google services or security updates. You still get an Android OS, actually the latest Android 10 with EMUI 10 on top. But you're missing the Play Store, and basically every app with Google's name on it. Granted, this is the Chinese version of the phone, but it's unclear if a future global version would do things differently, or even if there would be a global version at all. For now, since there's no Play Store, you'll need to get your apps from something like Huawei's App Gallery, which doesn't have a whole lot, or sideload them from a PC, and sadly, many apps just won't run properly without Google services. But besides the Google issue, the user interface is quite smooth. Navigation is done with gestures by default, and we've seen this layout before. The visual updates from EMUI 10 are most noticeable in the notification shade and the quick toggles. Because of the screen's extreme curve, the UI of certain apps may end up on the edge of the device, so you have the option to tweak apps to only display on the flat part, which does leave you with black bars. Under the hood is one of Huawei's top-tier chipsets, the new Kirin 990, along with 8 gigs of RAM. In CPU benchmarks, the Mate 30 Pro posts better scores than rivals running on a Snapdragon 855, but is still no match for the iPhones here. Turning on performance mode makes a difference in GPU tests. The Mate 30 Pro rivals the ROG Phone 2 and even the iPhone 11 Pro. In addition, it does a pretty good job with its thermals, regardless of performance mode. It doesn't get as hot as many competitors and delivers decent sustained performance. At 4500 mAh, the Mate 30 Pro's battery is a bit larger than last year's model. The phone did a great job in our proprietary screen-on tests and earned an excellent endurance rating of 103 hours. Charging is incredibly fast as well. The bundled 40-watt Huawei supercharger was able to charge the phone from 0 to 72% in half an hour. A full charge took just over an hour. There is support for 27-watt wireless charging if you buy the proprietary charging pad, and you can use reverse wireless charging to top up another device, but we found that quite finicky. Let's move on to the Mate 30 Pro's cameras. Along with the 40-megapixel main cam with the quad barrier filter that we saw on the P30 Pro, there's now a new 40-megapixel ultra-wide camera with a large sensor and bright lens. The third camera is an 8-megapixel 3x telephoto, and finally there's a TOF sensor for portrait mode. The camera interface is similar to what we've seen before. The camera modes are among the best in the business. But in landscape orientation, controlling the zoom is quite a stretch for the thumb, and I kind of miss using the volume keys as a shutter button. In daylight, photos taken with the main camera look quite nice, with great detail and foliage rendition, awesome dynamic range, and hardly any noise. Colors are conservative though. Yellows especially seem a bit weak. If you switch to the telephoto cam, you do have more vivid colors. You get 3x lossless zoom, and these shots look great, with better fine detail than the competition. The ultra-wide-angle camera is unlike any other on the market, with its large sensor and autofocus. These shots have excellent detail, basically no noise, and great dynamic range. Plus, the colors are nicer than on the main camera. We should note that the field of view isn't as wide as on other phones though. Like other quad-barrier cameras we've used, you can choose to shoot with the main and ultra-wide cameras in the full 40 megapixels. And just as before, you don't necessarily get much more detail this way, and the files will be a lot larger. Portraits can be taken with either the main cam or the 3x telephoto. There are plenty of effects you can add to the shot too. The results are pretty nice. You get very good subject separation, and the defocused background is well done. In low light, the Mate 30 Pro's main camera does an excellent job thanks to its large sensor. Photos look sharp and clean, with wide dynamic range, especially with light sources. We did notice a red shift in the colors though. If you turn on night mode, you get a bit more detail from the shadows, and the overall result looks livelier and more colorful. The reddish tint is still noticeable. At night, the ultra-wide cam will also give you great results, something you can't say about many phones. These are pretty much the best in the business. There's great detail and wide dynamic range. There's night mode for the ultra-wide-angle cam, but it comes with pros and cons. The colors are more accurate, and the redness is gone. But for some reason, these come out cropped and upscaled, resulting in softer photos with a narrower field of view. Sadly, if you try to zoom at night, you won't get great results. In most cases, the phone will crop digitally from the main camera. Occasionally, you will get an actual output from the telephoto. The zoom works with night mode too, but it's tricky to get a good handheld shot because of the long focal length. Unless you're using a tripod, don't expect a lot here. Moving on to selfies. The Mate 30 Pro's 32-megapixel fixed-focus selfie cam is the same as the one on the P30 Pro. There's also a TOF sensor on the front for portraits. Selfies come out with great detail, spot-on colors, and wide dynamic range. Overall, really nice. Selfie portraits are pretty impressive as well. Videos can be recorded with the main cam and the ultra-wide at up to 4K at 60 FPS, while the telephoto can record 4K at 30. Video stabilization is available in all modes and is always on. 4K videos from the main cam have good detail and sharpness, and dynamic range is wide. Colors are accurate too, except for a slight reddish tint. 4K videos from the ultra-wide cam also look quite nice. There is a noticeable difference in colors between the 30 FPS and the 60 FPS modes. Videos from the telephoto cam in 4K at 30 FPS look good, though the level of detail leaves a bit more to be desired. And finally, here's a neat trick. The Mate 30 Pro can shoot 720p super slow-mo video at 1920 FPS. And thanks to AI, this is extrapolated to 7680 FPS. So you get 256 times slowdown. Needless to say, you should have a lot of light here. So that's the Huawei Mate 30 Pro. Feature-wise, this phone has all the bells and whistles. There's a breathtaking curved OLED screen, excellent battery life, super fast charging, killer performance, and some of the best cameras in the business, especially the ultra-wide. Sadly, the lack of Google support means that one of the best flagships on the market is actually a pretty tough sell. In the West, how can you run an Android phone without Google services? Not very easily. We're not sure if the phone will even be released outside of China. So there it is. I find it hard to recommend buying a gray import. You'd have to forget about your Google account and take the time to sideload all of your apps. Let's hope for a change in Google's policy or the release of a global version, if there ever is one. Thanks for watching guys, and see you next time.